last but not least again, we welcome Roland Malkin, who is our President-elect of Cardiovascular Care Partnership. He has been running a group in Nottingham and is getting involved in a lot of initiatives and new structures in the NHS. And he is going to talk about our ambitions with regard to CCP UK and patient networks. Roland.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I'll start off with the title of the whole session. We asked a slightly impertinent question, really, but I think that's what patients can do at a conference like this. Patients are involved throughout the system, whether it be research or in clinical terms, but I think it may be slightly invisible because it's on a case-by-case basis. Each study, each line of work you're doing, Paul, there are various patients coming in, doing the work and going away. So there is a lot done by patients, mostly on a voluntary basis, but they're there and they're doing it. So one of the first things helping plan this, I wanted to put to the front was that unrecognised work should be recognised. CCP UK, who are we? Well, straight away we're an affiliated society of the British Cardiovascular Society. We're a membership organisation. We look after our own processes. We've got trustees, so it's very much independent of the BCS, but we are certainly very well attached to them. It was founded over 20 years ago, and we do have one of the founders in the building, as they say, in the room. Thank you very much, Jane, for pushing us to the front all those years ago. I know you had help from various of the presidents to get you going, but Jane has been with us through thick and thin, I think. And she recognised that there was too much representation from too few patients. And I think sometimes when you do look around, you do find there are the same old names, the same old faces appearing in various areas, certainly within the NHS, the tiny bits I've done, you bump into the same faces. Now, I don't know whether that's because they're seen to do a good job and asked to do the next job and they keep accepting they've got the time to do it. But the other side to that is we're losing diversity. We're losing the opportunity to have fresh views from other parts of society even in doing the same sort of work. So again, that's a highlight, but we're there, that's what we're founded for, and I think that's one of the core drivers of what we can do moving forward. Let me fill you in. Let me give you my story. I think I'm a typical patient. I may be a typical patient, I may not, but if I tell you my story, you can judge for yourself. Life was going happily until September 2014. At that point, I was an apparently healthy 49-year-old. 2 weeks to go to my 50th birthday, 3 weeks to go to a local half marathon, which I've been practicing greatly for. Thursday night, I'd done 15 kilometres around, the lake at Home Pier Pump Pool. Been round there 3 times. I was feeling great. Friday night, I sat down, and that's where I was, out of hospital cardiac arrest. And I won't give you my lucky version of my talk, but I was extremely lucky. For instance, my wife and son were in the room watching TV with me at the time, which probably 95% of the time they wouldn't be. And from then on, it goes on and on. But I was at home. All of my family saw what happened. My wife pulled me onto the floor, started CPR, and luckily, we've got a very good community first responder scheme in the town I live in. And luckily, the guy had not turned his pager off. It was 15 minutes after his shift should have ended, and he got the call come through. And within 10 minutes, I'd had the defibrillator attached, shocked, and my heart was back banging away again. So I was admitted straight into the Trent Cardiac Centre. 1 stent, up to the ward. That's when I came round. That's the first thing I remember from when the lights seemed to have gone out. And everything progressed well, and I was discharged on the Monday. In the hospital, I was told what had happened, and my wife went home to look after the kids, and that's where I'd actually made the big decision. And if you've seen the Shawshank Redemption, you will know the moment I'm going to talk about is when you've either got get busy living or get busy dying. And I had the choice between getting a big box of cotton wool out and taking everything really easily, or trying to make the best of what I got left. And I figured I'd live about the same amount of time either way, so let's go for it, you know. So I decided that. I started on the rehab classes, I returned to the gym, and I really felt that that was great. I got myself involved in an online group that revolved around sort of activity after a cardiac event, and it was a great group, people very much similar-minded. I think Helen might know one of my friends recently. You know Sean Doyle? Yeah, he's got a wonderful story, and that's what I met. Sean was one of the first people I met, and our backgrounds were so similar that we've got a lifelong friendship out of near death. How perverse is that? So in that group, I started to end up talking to my peers, and it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks when I suddenly had this odd, strange feeling that I was answering their need, not searching out my own questions. And that was quite a good feeling, because when you process it, if you're helping somebody, you're at comfort with yourself. And that's the first taste of being sort of involved in patient support or representation. And by the end of my cardiac rehab classes, one of the nurses just gave me a little bit of a nudge, and she said, I think you should go and join the Nottingham group. They need somebody like you. And I'd sort of thought, well, okay, wondered what the comment was about. I joined it, and in a sense, from that, I haven't looked back. For me, helping others does feel good. I've said it time and time again, I do what I do because it's leaving somebody with that little bit more of a smile on their face than when you first met them. And in the local rehab groups, you might have done it, Holly, when you're at rehab classes, people come in unsure of themselves, and if they talk to somebody that's had the experience, spend a bit of time with them, they realise that actually they're doing not too badly, and life's not going to be too problematic. Now, as I was doing that, there was one realisation that started to come into my mind. I'm relatively young, I hope, but I was in a group of people that were relatively old. And that, I think if you looked at cardiac rehab groups, that tends to be the age profile at the moment. So I looked at saying there's not many people like me around. And I think there's 1 or 2 people have said that to me in other situations. And that's one of the motivations for myself, is I don't want to focus on myself and what I can do. I want to actually try and share what I can do with others. A, to let them feel good themselves about helping other people, but to widen the army of helpers that are out there that will support people like Paul and all of your initiatives. But moving forward, I was empowered, and I took an opportunity to apply for a training programme. It came up in a very odd way. I think it was a targeted email, actually, but I was asked to look at it. And it was called the Back and Invitation, and it just so happened to be held in Hawaii, which it's such a hard place to go to. It was 5 days, and there were 2 or 3 days either side of it. And it was 5 days of a personal development course. It took you through who you were. It was a Medtronic Foundation, and they didn't hold back on spending money. The chap that led the course, in his first session, he was looking at one particular aspect, and it will come up in a second, but it was the highs and lows of life, and he got us to map sort of the highs and lows of our life, and really to get us to think, you know, have ups, we have downs, but after a down, there's always an up. And he put his picture on. And he said, number 5 in, I forget what the year was, but he said, that's when I won my Olympic gold. And everybody in the room just stopped. And he said, 3 years later, he said, I was at -5. That's when I was dropped from the rowing team. and he followed on. And I say, the personality they had was fantastic, and it was a fantastic time. We did get some downtime, so I'll just rub it in. We had a nice time. And oddly, Paul mentioned a date, the 7th of January 2019. That photograph may have been taken on that day. 1 or 2 days either way. Look, give it some poetic license, but that's when I was on that course anyway. So, finding CCP UK. I'm here, obviously, at some point I joined CCP. Part of that course taught me to start to deal with people with real authenticity. Be myself. Don't try and put a face on, because it will break you. And it also taught me that you cannot survive without support. So I came back, and through an ex-rehab nurse that I bumped into in Nottingham, she said, oh, come out with a coffee with one of my colleagues, Paul Stern. So this is the small world we operate in. And that was that process of finding people around you that can champion you, can give you that sort of bit of advice that you need occasionally, you can turn to, which patient reps don't normally have. I mean, I don't know what you'd say, Holly or Paul, but I don't think there's great support for the patients. They come along, do the bit, they go home. And it is done in relative isolation. I've been there. I've been to the support group, to the steering group, and you're on a Teams meeting and it's an hour, and then the switch gets flicked off, and you're left there thinking, oh right, I'm all by myself. And obviously it's accentuated because you've got a team of people that have been on that meeting. They all know each other. They all work with each other, and you're left again after the meeting isolated until the next meeting. Who do you turn to? I mean, I would have a conversation with Paul, but there are other things about being the patient rep, how things are going, is this right, is it? You don't get that chance to exchange those ideas. I've learned that my personal connections are imperative. You've got to meet people, you've got to talk to people, you've got to exchange ideas. Nothing can happen without that. You can't expect anything to happen unless you do have some form of relationship that's at least acknowledging the other people exist and they have wants, needs, whatever. I've already mentioned the life's ups and downs. I'll move on from that. Life balance needs to be there. Again, patient reps can get involved in project after project after project, and it is not serial. Many of these end up being parallel projects. People can get overloaded. That needs to be identified for people to help. And the last one, which you've already heard from me, is storytelling. Patients, at first, love to tell the story. Again, brilliance of cardiac support groups is people turn to them when their family have gone into sort of submission. They've heard the story 2 or 3 times. But telling your story is therapeutic. You go through the events, you rationalise them, and by telling the story, you place all the pieces of the jigsaw back together and you're assured of what you're looking at. Now, the last bit I add to this is a medal I was given. If people know the Medtronic organisation, employees that are there for after, I don't know what the time is, they get a medal. And it's to relieve pain, suffering. I forget what the last one is, but with this medal, it was the one saying, live on, give on. Earl Backen himself had pacemakers. I think he had diabetes pumps, and he thought, well, if I've had these devices, I think I should pull people together and teach them that their life goes on and they can give on as well, which is a wonderful sentiment. Unfortunately, that programme finished the year I went through it. There was no connection there. Unfortunately, it was Earl Backen had died just prior to us going to Hawaii. Now, I put about finding CCP. Well, actually, CCP found me. Through my support group, I'd got the BHF support group email. Come to Sheffield, they said. Come to Sheffield, meet the BHF, meet your fellow colleagues in support groups. Come for a cup of afternoon tea. And I thought, why not? What have I got to lose? So myself and my wife, we got in the car, drove up to Sheffield. Very nice hotel. Room was full. And again, I knew it was Heart Support Group because of the age profile, which I was going to say no more on at the moment. But I got welcome and went and sat down, and a gentleman came along. Can I call you a gentleman, David? And we got talking, and within minutes, we literally knew that we had similar, very, very similar ideas. And by the end of the afternoon, David was saying, give me your telephone number. I would like to invite you to join something I'm a member of. And he filled me in a little bit more about CCP. And again, I've not looked back since. So thank you, David. I think it worked. And that's how recruitment was, wasn't it? I think it's a very much tapping people up, as they call it. Now, CCP today. We are a group of patient representatives representing all cardiac conditions. I mean, we've got transplants, cardiomyopathies, ischemic heart disease. I won't list any more because we can go on. And we are working at all levels of the healthcare system. Two of our members edit, is that the right word, Richard? Or produce? It's the writing of the NICOR patients report. So there's something that's relatively up in the stratosphere, and there's myself. I'm down at the bottom level. I like dealing with people, so I'm happy there. That's what I want. But that's where we really thrive, is the variation in people and the ideas and sharing those ideas. As I've said, just about David, we've historically recruited from active representatives. So we bump into somebody that is doing that type of work, and the invite will be made. In a sense, that's slightly limiting in the number of people that we can gather into our network. So that then means we're hiding our light. We're not getting the message out. We're not talking to people. Now, the big positive is we are represented now on many of the BCS committees. We are respected by the BCS, and I can only thank Jane, I think, for her support in what she's brought to CCP. And long may it continue, because, again, I've had 15 months of exposure to that, and my confidence has gone through the roof as a result. Last year I came to this conference thinking, why would these cardiologists want me in the room with them for? But by the end of it, you realise the people you spoke to, they wanted to understand you and find out more and more. I mean, again, as a one aside, myself, Richard and Sarah, who you've already heard from, we were invited to a symposium in London with the Primary Care Cardiovascular Society, and that's where we met Vijay. And that's where a conversation went off. And Vijay wanted us, we asked, and Vijay wanted to support us. So we do find that if we ask, we have our authenticity, we get the results. Now, the ambitions of CCP, going forward, we want to establish and grow a network of patient groups. What we mean by that is those groups that are out there are unconnected. We have cardiac support group. They are BHF affiliated, but they have no other connection. We would like to take the mantle and bring those groups together so that the people that are serving the groups have somewhere to turn for advice, support, and they themselves can also help to look into the localities that are not served by support groups, and I know there are activities within the clinicians to get that sorted. What we're very good at is we are independent. We're not tied into anybody. We are not subservient. We do have the affiliation BCS, but that is it. We are pretty much masters of our own future. But our big push should be to develop the individuals that are working in PPI so that people can walk in and have somebody to turn to. As I said, it's lonely. We want to be able to, for those people, to turn to similar individuals and be able to have conversations about how they're finding things. On top of that, just to champion the role of patient representatives, I think we have done today by inviting Paul and Holly. We've exposed them to a bit more, and we can take that out. We've got this videoed, and we can take it out to research, we take out the clinical networks, and hopefully we can make the role of the patient representative more important. And finally, it's to maintain the profile of PPI in cardiology. I'll leave it there because I'm having a decreasing number of fingers thrown at me. And before Jane embarrasses herself, I'll invite any questions.
You pick it up, Roland.
Yeah. I got the last one I got was 3 minutes, so we're all right.
Thank you very much indeed. Well done. Questions for Roland? Yes.
Thank you.
If I squint, it's because the lights are right in my
Yes, the lights are right.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really enjoyed this whole session and all 3 talks. So I'm a cardiac scientist, and I've had PPI with my research, but I'm currently looking to develop a new pathway within our service, and also I work with a patient support group, and it's so wonderful to hear all of these ideas, and I feel like there's a lot that I can learn from the cardiovascular care partnership. So I wondered if you had any advice on how I can actually get in touch, and so perhaps the team that are currently helping, so I've got a group of patients who run the support group, how I can get them in touch and get some support for them. It'll be a really useful start.
Come and see me afterwards.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you to everyone. I think that's been really fascinating.
Yeah.
Good to see you here. Does anyone else have any questions? Because we are obviously getting... Oh, Paul's got a question.
No,
you don't want to interact. I mean, we often... it's Holly. Go on, got another question.
Do you have, so all of your members, do you have a time when you all get together apart from this meeting, or do you have sort of virtual or in person? Or?
Yeah, again, it's planning. The best way to say is planning. We want to be doing at least four meetings a year. Clearly, we have trustees meetings. You know that because you're a trustee of the junior cardiologists, aren't you? But we would like to start to have proper members' meetings. And I'm looking at you, Holly, because we always want cardiologists to come, and patients love cardiologists. But it's to get that type of input in a virtual meeting that can inform the more interested patients about what's going on. I mean, it could be saying, and bring together groups to say, what is it groups want to know at the moment? And it might be something very simple. And if they say, well, your group said, oh, could we have a chat with somebody about this? We could make it into maybe a wider conversation. And it won't be only just, us. If we get a number of groups, we can get everybody talking. And that's my... don't get me started. That's my thing. I love to connect people together, so leave that. As I've proved with these two.
Obviously, we've always sought for experienced patients who are keen to give something back and are happy to work at a national level, essentially. And our members have done that for many years and have been much appreciated, and it's keeping that continuity. But obviously they do appreciate cardiological support, so I'm keen to make sure we bring in new blood, both from patients and cardiology, of course, as well.
Just obviously your story. I'm glad you're okay now. In one of the sessions earlier on, there was quite a horrifying statistic that 80% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests happen within a 5-minute walk of the defibrillator, but only 10% of those cases actually get the defibrillator.
I'll give you mine as a user.
It feels like we've put them out, but have people know where they are?
Well, once you've had one used on you, I've through the Medtronic connection, there's an American lady I know called Carrie Romero, and her Twitter tag is Zap Girl. And she doesn't do it as much now, but she used to go around and encourage people to take photographs of their defibrillators and post them onto her Twitter. And if anything, you think, well, that's not good because they don't say where it is. But actually, it was making people aware of where they were. The person taking the photograph was actively seeking them out to take the photograph. So it works. And I suppose, it's not because I fear that I will need one, but I just love spotting defibrillators in the most. There's one, if anybody wants to know, if you go down to near reception, there's a first aid pack with a defibrillator next to it, just down the end of the corridor. And I think that's probably about 200 metres. But the big thing is, it's the distance. I'll ask, I might say to Helen, how long would it take you to do 500 metres, Helen? In a rush. No, but that distance gets to be slightly prohibitive, because let's just say somebody's ambulatory, not runner, they haven't got a vehicle. A kilometre is what? 10 minutes?
Yeah, I guess relative speeding, right?
Yeah, but remember the statistics of what every minute does to the subject.
Do you think as the CCP we could try and think of some way of some initiative where we say to everyone, go get your relatives to find out where the nearest one is?
BHF have it, don't they?
Yeah.
Do they have one?
I was just going to add to that. There is the BHF did a bit of work with was West Midlands Ambulance Service actually on behalf of the whole country. The circuit, if you Google the circuit, and it is essentially an interactive map of where all the defibs. So I appreciate it's only defibs that have been registered. So the big bit of work is to make sure that if there is a defib in your community, that it is registered. But all those defibrillators that are registered are on that, and
of
also,
course.
the
BHF gave out, of course, a lot of the earlier tranches of these. Yes.
They did, and all the call handlers will have
And they
access
do
to
work.
that as well.
They do
both
work.
ambulance.
Not only do they actually just have a register of where they all are, they're all passed on to the ambulance service.
Yes, exactly.
And I own an AED, and that one I have to check it every month, and the circuit phone me and email me so as to report back that yes, it is still working, the batteries are okay, and it comes up properly. I think it's a fantastic service, and it's very, very well run.
Yeah. It's just, hopefully that statistic will start to improve, because that was last year's data, which is really worrying, isn't it? But perhaps it's them thinking of it. Maybe.
I think there's an awareness thing. You remember there was the HAT trial, where old anterior infarct patients, families were allocated AEDs and trained, but it didn't really, people were very wary when it came to it and didn't actually use. So I think, there's a whole issue there to be looked at.
One of the other things I'll say is I used to run a support group for the Thames Valley for Cardiomyopathy UK, and we had the local ambulance service come, and they actually taught all the members how to use one, and it is so simple. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. You can't do it wrong because it tells you what to do, and it tells you if you're wrong. So, please, anybody, don't be frightened of using an AED, because it is so important. Overall. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, and on that note, from Richard and myself, and thank you to all the speakers this afternoon, Ollie, Paul, Roland. I think you'll agree we've had another very interesting session. And thank you all for attending and staying to this shift, which is never a popular shift. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jane.
And do keep in touch with us.